there's a lot of people who say they like quantum, but very few who want to talk about it. I'm not surprised why. Any bulls on quantum? So my basic position on quantum is that these stocks, the 4 stocks that I've posted, and it extends to more companies, efforts, and stocks and stuff like that, is that there actually is no point to building a quantum computer. My point on quantum is that quantum computers are actually very slow. Whenever some idiot writes an article that they're fast, they don't know what they're talking about. Our current computers are fast from NVIDIA and Intel and so forth, but quantum computers are actually quite slow. They're only fast in the sense that certain algorithms can be run very quickly on a quantum computer. In fact, there's really only one that can be run very quickly on a quantum computer, and that's Shor's algorithm. And so unless you're dealing with Shor's, there's no real sense in trying to use a quantum computer for anything else. So like the image that these companies try to conjure is like, they could do mat-moles really fast. It's just not how these machines work. In fact, they do operations very slowly. Compared to a normal processor, they're a billion times slower, anywhere from a million to a billion times slower at basic operations. It's just that for factoring, you can get away with a lot less operations. So even though it's slower, it finishes the job faster. But that's the only situation. Anyway.
How's it going? I just wanted to go over a couple bullet points that I heard. One of the main ones that I'm seeing quite a bit is the BlackRock and Vanguard ownership in QBTS or whatever. I heard it's mostly from Russell 2000 and these ETFs, but people are fairly convinced that just because big players like BlackRock is purchasing shares, that it's all of a sudden a massive bull case because they see something that everyone else doesn't.
Yeah, obviously these firms don't have any active analysts that are sitting there saying, I like this stock or that stock. Almost everybody on Wall Street who meets these companies runs away as fast as they can because they're this kind of the scariest companies with the worst management teams I've ever seen. So it is the only people that like them are the bankers. So if you look at these 4 stocks, you cannot find one institutional holder that is out there saying, I actually like the fundamentals and I think these stocks are going up. So there's no bull on Wall Street. And Wall Street's always got some bull who's convinced in the story, but you really have to look really, really hard to find even one fund, long only, hedge, anyone that's really bullish on the outcome of quantum. I think the people that are bullish on quantum in general are just people that like stocks that are going up. You have a really underrepresented shareholder base with these stocks. There's almost no institutions. And to your point, the institutions that do exist are quants that are providing liquidity, kind of index attached investors. So what else were you hearing?
That was kind of the main point, but besides that, obviously you've covered a couple of the other points regarding like pharma purchasing. In terms of pharma research, that was a big point I heard. I know you've already kind of partially debunked it, but I was still a bit, confused as to. I know it's a small market, is like in general, but like, what is it why can't that kind of computing be used for pharma research when a lot of people are fairly convinced it can be?
Yeah, not a lot of people are convinced it can't be. So if you talk to people in pharma, they mostly will laugh at you over that. So in pharma, when we discover drugs, we don't really need quantum in any way, shape, or form. In fact, we barely need computers. And the proof of that is if you look at Schrodinger, the revenue is 100 million. And in fact, the head of Google Quantum privately told a friend of mine that they do throw their hands up and wonder why they're doing this sometimes because they pointed out Schrodinger is kind of their best case scenario. And what's ironic about that is it's really not clear to me that quantum will actually help you at all in drug discovery because when you do a medicinal chemistry campaign, it's not about getting the best binder. It's about getting a family of drugs that you can make trade-offs on. So metabolism, toxicity, drug-drug interactions, plasma binding. You have to sort of take a series of chemicals and test them in the real world. Because you can't test all this stuff in a machine. You can barely test any of this stuff in a machine. See kind of which drug specifically, whether you take it and iterate on it or you found one from the original series that you can actually take and put into humans and then see what happens. 99% of the expense and frustration of drug development happens after you invent the drug. So there really isn't much to do in that early stage, of drug development. Most of the spend of drug development comes after you file your IND. It comes from manufacturing in that early stage as well. Those early campaigns can cost a lot. But, when it comes to actually designing the drug and developing the drug, for small molecules, it's not that hard. There's a team of chemists involved. They spend a little money, but you're not going to be spending more than a handful of millions of dollars. Maybe if they're really complex and thorough work, but that work isn't going to be done. It's mostly biology stuff and other things like that, assay development, stuff quantum can't help you with. So the actual part of the system where you're doing ligand docking and changing different functional groups, quantum really can't help you much. And also, there's not enough exactness in chemistry that you can use. I mean, you add a methyl group to make a hydrophobic interaction. There's not much else you can do there that a quantum computer is going to tell you. If there's a hole in the protein you're trying to bind, and you need this much energy, you don't need a quantum computer to tell you that. You need a methyl group, or you need a hydrogen bond there, or whatever. So I think basically there's anybody who's an expert in that space knows that. I talked to some friends at SpaceX who are experts in material science. I mean, they make rockets, for crying out loud, and they said they also don't see a need for quantum to help them in material science. But the thing about quantum that's really important to understand here is to get back to basics, which is, why is this supposed to help? Remember, these machines they're around 100 hertz to 100,000 hertz. Your phone, your laptop is gigahertz. Okay, so why would you ever want one of these things? You can do simulations on your computer. The only reason you'd ever want one of these things that's a million times slower is if you can use an algorithm that's billions of times faster. And there's only one algorithm that exists that way, and it's Shor's algorithm for factoring large numbers. Factoring large numbers only has one purpose, if you can call it that, which is cryptography. So in pharma, using quantum systems to simulate quantum reality is very, very far away. That's not the plan for the quantum companies. That might be the plan 50 years from now. But right now, we can't do that with quantum computers.
So this kind of leads into my next question. This is more so D-Wave specific.
Yeah.
But why is D-Wave fixated on annealing, and then all the other players, even all the, the old penny stocks like IonQ and all those other players, why are they going for your more typical quantum computing route compared to annealing? They seem to be the only players. Is there something unique about it?
Yeah, I think it's a fraud. I mean, it's just fraud. The quantum computing is a real thing. I've been fascinated by it since I was a kid. It's extremely fascinating because if you've ever studied complexity or computer science, you know that factoring a large number, a semi-prime, is a very difficult problem computationally. There's no known algorithm that can get you polynomial time speed. It's an exponential algorithm. So a 300-digit number is literally impossible to factor, but a 50-digit number you can factor. 100-digit is pretty challenging. 200 digits is basically impossible. And as you scale up, you basically no amount of conceivable computers could ever do it. And then you show a quantum algorithm, you say, no, this thing can do it. If you can create this computer can do that 300-digit factor really easily. You could do a 1,000-digit factor really easily. But you need to actually make this machine. And that's stunning. I mean, if you study Turing completeness and things like that, there should not be a computer that is different that can actually make it faster. That's the whole point of a universal Turing machine, that every computer is simulated by another computer. Not in this case. There's the lone exception where you actually get this amazing speed up. You go from the exponential world to the polynomial world. It's almost like a wormhole or something. You're in a totally different regime, and this super hard problem becomes super easy. And so when you think about annealing, there's no recharacterization of the complexity of the problem. And that's why D-Wave has never been able to prove that their machine's any faster than any normal computer. So I've asked many times to pay D-Wave to use their computer. They've said no every time. I've sent people under the table, not revealing their true identity to try to get the computer for me. D-Wave said no again. D-Wave's revenue is down 30% year over year, and they claim that they don't need a quantum computer. Their quantum annealer is good enough. This is a crazy claim because they have almost no revenue. And if their quantum annealer was good, people would be using it. People find technology. ChatGPT's revenue is 20 billion. You know, it didn't take much for it to catch fire. It didn't take much for people to see that this is really great technology. Let me use it. They couldn't stop it in a way. As you guys may know, my partner helped launch ChatGPT, and you know they couldn't contain it once they released it. It was that fast that the whole world, you know, caught fire. Not the case with quantum annealing, where they've been at this for almost 20 years with quantum annealing, and nobody's found a use case. I think D-Wave is really, you know, if you look at their financials, you'll sort of see what's going on. And again, we're not willing to sell a cloud service. I've used almost every cloud service on the planet: AWS, CoreWeave, you know, Azure, GCP. I'm using Lambda Labs as we speak to run an algorithm. I've never heard of I've even used the other quantums, IonQ and Rigetti. I've never heard of a company, IBM, not willing to rent out its computers on the cloud, but kind of vetting those customers to make sure they don't say something bad or do something on the machine that could be, you know, damaging to their business long term. And so D-Wave to me is just this uber scam. At least IonQ, Rigetti, and the others, there is something to chase there. And the prayer that, and this is kind of what Satya and Sundar have said, the prayer that, you know, someday there might be more quantum algorithms. To me, that's sort of a very fanciful. I mean, we have not had real new quantum algorithm for 30 years. It's a really rough space that a lot of people have left and abandoned because it's kind of a dead space. Most quantum people have pivoted to AI or to something else. You know, our friend Beth, who we started the 𝗢𝗏 movement with, he pivoted to thermodynamic computing, which is an interesting kind of form of analog computing. No, there are not that many more people still persisting on quantum, and the handful of people that do and are real experts in the space have said over and over again that we're 20 to 30 years away. And that means we're 20 to 30 years away from shores. So that means we're 20, 30 years away from being able to factor a really big number, which has no use other than the fact that we use it for cryptography, which we can easily replace and do cryptography some other way. So there's no need to worry about that. Nobody really is going to care about the shores part. So what are we chasing? And Chris Monroe, the founder of IonQ, says it very clearly in many interviews that we're still looking for an application. We don't have an application. And praying that, yeah.
So this kind of leads us to my next question. So I know that before you were very bearish on IonQ, and then they recently started doing a bunch of acquisitions, and the stock price kept going up. And then, well, now you got D-Wave. They're doing the same thing. They just raised a whole bunch of money. They have about, what, $800 million?
Yeah.
Are you, because I know you got a short position, are you not worried that they'll follow the same route?
No, I mean,
buying up companies and then growing inorganically?
Not at all. I mean, you can grow inorganically by buying McDonald's franchises. You know, it doesn't mean you've created value. You know, anybody can, acquisitions are a skill. Valeant was a famous pharmaceutical company that basically had unlimited access to the capital markets. And their stock went down 90% because they made bad M&A deals. Just doing M&A does not make your stock go up. In fact, almost every roll-up ends in tears, because what ends up happening is the stock goes up for a little while, but then the shareholders realize that the managers are not actually doing smart acquisitions. They're taking capital and blighting it on fire. They probably could get better returns buying the S&P 500. So I know one of the companies that IonQ bought, I have a friend that also bid for that company, and he bid half the price. And he thought he was bidding too much. Now, this is not a small deal. It's a multi-$100 million deal. And the company they bought is largely in shambles. So one of the problems Valeant had when they bought pharma companies is that you actually have to run these things. And I was fairly close to the Valeant senior management team, and one of the problems they had is they would buy these companies and they said, Martin, once we buy them, we leave them alone. We don't try to integrate. We don't try to do synergies. We just buy them and let them continue to operate. And they kind of didn't have a great plan for how to do 50 to 100 deals a year. Now, IonQ is not doing 50 to 100 deals a year, but you still do have to run these businesses. When I ran my company, I tried not to do more than one acquisition a year, because as much as I love doing deals, I really didn't want to just kind of get, in a place where, I was not really able to keep in touch and keep on top of the businesses I was buying. You have to slowly bring them in, their culture, their people, their customers. You don't just buy 10 companies and, pray. And I think it's a desperation move by both management teams. Now, neither of the stocks have really gone up since they went on their acquisition spree. The only thing that's gone up is their market caps because they've issued tons of shares. And to me, it's not very bullish when a company says, okay, I have this hot stock right now. I'm going to issue as many shares as I can to get as much cash as I can and as much, new businesses as I can. What's wrong with your current business? Why isn't your current business good enough? Why do you need to sell off your allegedly really promising business to buy other businesses? To me, that's a disaster. IonQ is largely pivoted from quantum computing. They're talking about everything but quantum computing now. They're talking about quantum networking. They're talking about space-based quantum. They bought a space company. The guy says that he's going to be at the very least, this is his words, he's going to be at least as big as Cisco because quantum networking will replace normal networking. Quantum networking is not really needed. Quantum networking is a really fancy thing where you can actually tell if your channel is being eavesdropped on, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. But right now, with normal encryption, which both in its current state and in its future quantum proof state, will also have that feature of being extremely robust. The only people that would need quantum networking, which is, one, it's largely science fiction at the moment, but it's so robust that it's like basically spy-proof, and we have other systems like that, by the way. The quantum network is not the only one. But a quantum network like that would maybe only need to be used by military or something like that. There's no need to make a quantum internet. And in fact, the other funny thing about this is the kind of quantum networking that's being proposed by IonQ, which is not like full quantum networking, is already been adopted. It's been around since '84. And if you want quantum, quote unquote, quantum networking, you can do that right now with fiber optics. So it's not really a new technology, and it's fairly low margin. And very few people need it or feel the need that they need to use it, but you could deploy it right now. So I think IonQ is largely just trying to get revenue from other things and distract from the fact that their quantum system's actually kind of not even in the top half, I would say, of quantum computers. I would put Quantinuum as number one, and I wouldn't put IonQ in even the top half. Google's up there, IBM, Microsoft's kind of this weird dark horse, and the publicly traded companies, it's hard to say. I would probably put IonQ and Rigetti as tied. And remember, these companies couldn't become public themselves. They needed to do a SPAC, and they had down rounds in private markets. So this was an ugly space. And, I think traders out there now want the next big thing. So they have Joby, they have Archer, they have all kinds of crazy stocks, Oklo, all the nuclear stocks, the eVTOL stocks, tons of weird stocks that are going up a ton. But they're all bubbles and they'll all pop. And the only question is, as a short, can you survive it? But as a long, this is just Russian roulette. I mean, all of these companies will go down 99%. It's just a question of when does the musical chair stop?
I got a question. It's a little bit off topic, but it's about Joby. I know you have a pretty sizable short
No,
position.
I don't have a sizable short position. I have a small short position.
Oh, small short? Okay. But regarding Joby, I know that they do drone manufacturing. It's more so a larger scale, public transport. Is that correct?
No, they don't have any revenue.
But I know, but I'm saying couldn't they pivot towards a military application? So building drones and stuff like that. That would be my.
I mean, it's a $16 billion company by market cap. They have no revenue. Could they do something valuable? Well, sure, anybody can do something valuable. My privately held company has more revenue than Joby, and we're growing fast. And we're not making, these aviation vehicles, but could they decide to start being a military contractor? I'm sure they could, but there's other companies that are doing that, and I think the military has VTOLs, and I'm not sure that Joby has to prove that they have the financial wherewithal to just do their basic business plan, which is pretty flawed, I think. And I don't know, it's a really big market cap for a company that has $15,000 of revenue. Just having low revenue doesn't automatically cross you off my list. I mean, I think that biotech naturally, we develop a drug, work hard, we have no revenue for a while, and then the revenue comes, when the drug gets FDA approval, the clinical trials work. And, so I'm willing to humor concept companies. I don't pick on all of them, but in this case, I'm not sure that you're getting a whole lot better than a helicopter with this vehicle. And basically the helicopter sort of ferry and creation business is much larger than, is already smaller than Joby's very large market cap. So like all the helicopter manufacturers in the world, plus all the helicopter Uber's businesses in the world, they just bought the main one called Blade for only a couple $100 million. It really wouldn't even add up to Joby's current market cap, which is just science fiction. I mean, it's a concept stock. When reality hits and they actually have to do revenue by using their VTOLs to ferry people around Dubai, which is their current plan. Assuming these things are safe and they have some advantage versus just a plain old helicopter, you know, that's their business plan, and it'll be really hard to see them be able to be successful in what's kind of a low margin, hard to operate business. I mean, their planes, what I would do is I would trade it at a premium to how many planes they built. Because in general, when you buy a 747, let's say you buy a plane for $50 million in your commercial airline, your hope is that you would get more than 50 in earnings from it. Otherwise, you wouldn't buy it. But you're not hoping you're going to get $1 billion in earnings from buying a $50 million plane. Otherwise, the Boeing would keep the planes themselves. They would just do their own airline. Why would they need to sell to Delta? And so you might get double your money when you buy a plane like that. And the same thing applies to Joby. Their planes cost around $40 million a piece. They've made like 8 of them. The value of the plane is not much more than the cost of the plane. Their margins are not going to be 95%. They're going to be like 30% like every other one. So at the end of the day, the peak margins these guys could have and the peak amount of planes they could make, it just doesn't make sense that this thing could ever be worth that much. Now, again, am I a VTOL expert? No, I'm more of a quantum expert. But it seems like just another stock that's just out of control and, you know, bulls on parade trying to run up the next GameStop or something like that. And reality is just so different. And eventually there's going to be kind of a reckoning. But again, I'm betting that, you know, I could be wrong.